This is my Nikon Z FC. I love this camera both for capturing video and for stills. But there's one lens that's always been missing from my setup with this camera, and that is a fast aperture wide angle lens. That is until Viltrox announced the 13mm f1.4 autofocus lens for crop sensor Nikon Z mount cameras. And here it is, and I'm very excited to have it. And in this video, I'm going to tell you all about this lens, and I'm going to be capturing some landscape photographs with it right here in Dartmoor National Park. Good morning and welcome to Dartmoor. It's a beautiful morning. I've had to get up really early, but just look at this place. There's probably no other place I'd rather be this morning with my camera. So what can you expect in this video? Well, we're going to talk a lot about this Viltrox 13mm lens. I'll tell you a little bit about the specifications, or certainly specifications that are of interest and relevance to me as a landscape photographer. I'm also going to be capturing some landscape photographs with this lens this morning right here at Bowerman's Nose, and also share with you some of the landscape photographs that I've been capturing over the last couple of weeks that I've been using this lens. Now, it is only going to be landscape photographs. That's the only types of photograph I've really been taking with this lens because I'm a landscape photographer. I'm also going to be using this, also going to be talking about this lens when it comes to video as well, because one of the key uses for this lens for me is going to be video. So as much as possible, I'm going to shoot this morning's video using the Nikon Z FC and the 13mm lens. I may have to switch to another camera every now and again, but what I'll do is I'll pop in one of the corner of the screens which camera and lens I'm using, so you know when I'm using the 13mm on the Nikon Z FC. So that will cover video. Then I'll share my final thoughts. So that's what you can expect in this video. Obviously a little bit of landscape photography. I can see the sun's about to rise up above the horizon, so I think it's time to switch to stills mode and take some pictures of Bowerman's Nose. Right, for my first composition, I'm going to have to work pretty quickly because the sun is rising up above the horizon. There's barely any cloud in the sky at all, which means the light is hitting the side of Bowerman's Nose, one of the most unique tors there is on Dartmoor, and it's casting that golden light along the side of it, and it's giving me some nice, adding a lot of contrast and making that hunk of rock look like a three-dimensional object, because when you don't have the light, the trouble with Dartmoor tors is it can look very grey and flat. And I'm trying to use the benefits of this wide-angle lens to capture some of the foreground rocks, which act as lead-in lines out to the main tor. And then we've got the beautiful background there, this nice soft pastel sky. If you look there just behind me, you can see Bowerman's Nose there, just catching that morning light. And this is just realised one of the great things about having a wide angle lens for doing videos. I can stand relatively close to the camera because I'm kind of balanced on a rock here, so it makes it a little bit easier to do this kind of stuff. And the other benefit of using this wide angle lens is I'm able to capture a lot more of this foreground here. And the light is just catching the side of the ferns and the side of the rocks. It's a really beautiful scene. Barely a breath of wind, it's nice and calm, nice and relaxing. What a morning to be out with a camera. I think as landscape photographers we spend a lot of time analysing weather forecasts, looking for optimal conditions. And under normal circumstances, a clear blue sky morning would not encourage me to get up at crazy o'clock in the morning. But as it's turned out, it's a beautiful morning. There's barely a breath of wind in the sky. There's barely any clouds in the sky. It's just a nice, tranquil, peaceful morning. The birds are singing. You know, like I said, where else would I rather be? This is a great place to be. But what that clear sky is also giving me is it's allowing the power of the sun to come along and really cast light across the landscape there. And as it's rising and swinging round there, it's actually, the light is changing from one side of Bowerman's Nose to the other, giving me some new compositional opportunities to capture photographs. And it's really enjoyable working with this wide angle lens as well, because most of my landscape photographs are wide angle lens. So having that ability to go wide on the Nikon Z FC is really great, and particularly for a location like this where there's lots of foreground, but you still have to be reasonably close to Bowerman's Nose itself. It's a real bonus having that lens. The sun has been up for about 30 minutes now, and during that time I've captured some photographs that I'm really happy with. I'm going to wait for it to rise a bit more and swing around a bit further just to see if it opens up some additional compositions around this side of Bowerman's Nose. We'll just have to see how it goes. But while I'm waiting for that, why don't I spend the time and tell you a little bit more about this lens. One thing I do want to say is that Viltrox did reach out to me and asked me if I wanted to review this lens. So they have sent me this lens to review, but they're not paying me to make this video. Money is exchanged hands. They haven't asked me to say anything. And when I publish this video, that'll be the first time they get to see it alongside you. So any of the thoughts that I have about this lens are my own. But I have reviewed previous Viltrox lenses. I've got their 24mm and the 85mm lenses for full frame Nikon Z cameras, and I've got their 23mm f1.4 for Nikon Z crop cameras. Now that 23mm lens has been brilliant for me. I use it for virtually all the videos that I make for this channel. It's a really good lens for doing video work, so it'll be really interesting to see how I get on with this 13mm, because when it's combined as a video lens and I can use it for landscape photography, like I'm trying to do here today, I can probably go out with one camera, one lens, and shoot photographs and shoot video with it. So it'll be interesting to see how we get on with it. Let's start by talking about some of the specifications of this lens. Now I'm just going to talk about some of the specifications that are of interest and relevance to me as a landscape photographer. If you want to check out all the specifications, I'll include a link for the lens in the video description below. But this is a lens designed for crop sensor Nikon Z cameras. So at the moment this is just the Nikon Z FC and the Nikon Z50, but it will work with full frame cameras because the mount's the same. It's just that your full frame camera will automatically switch to crop mode, or DX mode as it's commonly known in the Nikon world. The lens has an aperture that goes from f1.4 to f16. The filter thread size at the front there is 67mm. It doesn't have a bulbous front end, so it's going to be really easy for me to use my existing filter system with this lens. Critically, the lens works with, it's an autofocus lens, and it works with all the autofocus modes I've got on my Nikon Z FC, including that all-important eye autofocus. However, the lens does not have image stabilization. The lens measures 74mm by 90mm and weighs 455 grams, so it's slightly bigger and heavier than its 23mm equivalent, but it feels well constructed and very well built. There are some controls on the lens. There's a smooth aperture ring, which you can use to set the aperture from f1.4 all the way through to f16, or if you put it in A mode, you can control the aperture using the command dial on the back of the camera. There's also a very smooth focus control ring at the front of the lens. The lens mount is of metal construction, but it is only dustproof. It's not fully weather resistant. The lens also comes with a pouch and a lens hood, and importantly, it's got a little USB socket on it, which you can use to apply firmware updates. Let's talk about landscape photography with this lens. So when I bought my Nikon Z FC, I originally only really bought it to do video work on. Actually, if you want to see my video review of that camera, I'll include a link for it in the video description below. But I soon discovered it was a really capable camera, not really unsurprisingly, a really good camera for capturing landscape photographs. A nice small camera that I could chuck in my bag and go on all-day walks or up some mountains. But the one thing I was missing really was a wide-angle lens, something that I could use to capture landscape photographs, because really the types of landscape photographs that I like to take tend to be shot with a wide-angle lens. So what is this lens like to use for landscape photography? Well, I do miss the flexibility of having a zoom lens, but 13mm is still a very practical focal length for me to use. It really suits my style of photography. Image quality is as good as I would expect from a lens at this price point. This is a budget lens, but when paired with the Nikon Z FC, I'm still getting results that I'm very happy with. Hopefully you've seen some of the images that I've captured this morning, and you've seen some of the images that I've been capturing over the last few weeks. So actually, if you want to see those in a bit more detail, head on over to my blog. There's a link for that in the video description below, and that'll take you straight to the blog post for this video. Also, the lens does have a little bit of vignetting around f1.4, f1.8. I've noticed this because I have used the lens also to take pictures of the family and the dog, so it has come in really useful for that as well. But certainly for landscape photography, where I shoot most of my images somewhere between f8, f11, f13, I've not noticed any problems, and I've been really happy with the results. Autofocus is fast and reliable, certainly good enough for landscape work as well, but I haven't seen any problems with it with capturing some slightly faster moving objects such as my family and especially my dog. As I said earlier, the thread size on the front is 67mm, but it doesn't have a bulbous front end, so it works extremely well with my existing filter system. So can it compare to my Nikon Z7 and my Nikon Z 14 to 30mm lens? Of course not. They're vastly different setups at vastly different price points. But when I take the Nikon Z FC out to capture landscape photographs, I'm going for a specific reason, like say to climb up a mountain or go on a long walk. So I'm already aware of some of the compromises using a crop sensor camera will give me. So I don't have an issue with using a budget lens on this camera. It still gives me the results that I'm looking for and I'm expecting. The only negative I can find about this lens for landscape photography is it is susceptible to a bit of lens flare when you're shooting directly into the sun. But to be honest, at this price point, I wouldn't expect a budget lens to have special coatings to help prevent things like flare. So what about video with the Viltrox 13mm? Well, this is where I feel that this lens really fills a gap in the Nikon Z lineup. It's wide angle, which makes it really useful, but more importantly than that, it is also fast aperture at f1.4, and this allows me to do a couple of things. First of all, if I'm shooting at one of these wide apertures, I get a nice soft background, which helps give my videos a really nice look. But also, opening it up at f1.4 allows lots of light to come in, which when I'm shooting at maybe 30 minutes before sunrise or 30 minutes after sunset, where the light can be quite low, making videos with a fast aperture lens is a real bonus. I love my Viltrox 23mm lens. It's barely left my Nikon Z FC when it comes to creating videos. But sometimes that 23mm focal length is a little bit difficult to work with, especially some of the locations I go to where I'm maybe standing on a tour, and being close to the camera is really a necessity rather than a nice to have. So having a wide angle lens like this at 30mm allows me to stand quite close to the camera in a small space, but also get a lot of what's happening in the background, helping me tell the story in my video. That fast, wide open aperture would be useless to me as a solo filmmaker if it didn't support eye autofocus. Unfortunately it does, and it has no problems keeping track of my face and my eye. I'm shooting at f2 at the moment, and I've had no problems this morning at all. And I have already shot another video with this lens and the Nikon Z FC, and I had no problems there either. It just was able to lock on and give me some wonderful looking video. The Viltrox 13mm is probably going to become my go-to lens for creating on-location landscape photography videos. It's wide angle, fast aperture, makes it really useful for creating that type of content. I'm still going to continue using the 23mm lens, but that's probably going to be more for the videos that I create at home. Okay, let me see if I can share my final thoughts on this lens. And please bear in mind, these are my own thoughts. These are my personal thoughts, and they're balanced against my requirements and priorities. You may have a whole different set of requirements and priorities. But priced at around £300 currently, I think this lens offers excellent value for money. I have no complaints about the image quality from this lens. Yes, if I bought a Nikon lens at 3 times the price, in most circumstances it's likely to yield better results, but it is 3 times the price. But as a budget lens, I think this produces excellent results. I've also used this lens to capture pictures of the family and the dog, and that fast autofocus and that wide open aperture has allowed me to create some wonderful family photographs. Sure, at those wide open apertures, there's a little bit of vignetting, but this is easily corrected in post-production. I'm going on holiday in July with the family. I'm taking the Nikon Z, and I'm definitely going to be taking this Viltrox 13mm with me. As for video, this is the lens I've been waiting for a while. It's wide angle, fast aperture, and works with eye autofocus. It's a solo filmmaker's dream. Now, there are some things I would like the lens to have had. I'm not going to call these negatives per se, because given that this is a budget lens, there are always going to be some compromises. First of all, it would be really nice if it was a zoom, perhaps 13 to 23 would be nice. It would make it a little bit more flexible. But again, it's going to be bigger, heavier, and more expensive. It would be nice if the lens had some weather sealing, but I guess, again, this is a budget lens, and when I'm pairing it with the Nikon Z, which isn't weather sealed anyway, I guess it's not too much of an issue. What might be handy though is some image stabilization, but again, all these things add to weight and the cost. Unfortunately, the Nikon Z doesn't have any inbuilt stabilization, so without any lens stabilization or camera stabilization, though this lens is touted as a kind of vlogger's dream, I think if you're holding it handheld, I'm not sure how stable the footage would be. To be honest though, I shoot almost all my video on the tripod, so it's much less of an issue for me. That all said, the Viltrox 13mm f1.4 for Nikon Z crop cameras is a clear winner for me, and I would happily spend my own money on it. It's great for video, it's great for stills, has excellent autofocus system, and at this price point, it represents excellent value for money. If you want to pick up this lens, it's currently available as part of an Indiegogo campaign. That campaign runs until the 30th of June, but it's already met its funding goal. I think currently you can pick one up for about £297, which for me is an absolute steal. After that's finished, it will be available on the Viltrox store. I'll include a link for the Indiegogo campaign and the Viltrox store in the video description below. Well, I do hope you have enjoyed this video. I've certainly had a brilliant time up here in Dartmoor National Park this morning capturing images of Bowerman's nose. It's been a beautiful morning, and I hope you've enjoyed it as well, looking at the photographs and hearing about the Viltrox lens. And if you have enjoyed it, click that like button, and of course leave me a comment. I do try and read and reply to everyone's comments. But if you've got a few more extra minutes, I'm popping up a couple of relevant playlists in the corner of the screen there, so why not check out one of my other videos as well. And if you want to see more from myself, why not click on that subscribe button as well. But anyway, until the next video, I'll see you then.